Okay, thank you very much. I'm surprised to see so many of you based on the party last night. I didn't expect to see this many faces, so thank you for making the time. My name's Thomas Shipley, and I'm going to talk to you today about persuasion, a skill that we all use in our day-to-day lives, both in work and at home, and one that can sometimes be difficult and we can struggle with. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you might improve that skill and how you might apply it in the workplace to be a more persuasive tester. So before I do that, as has already been said, my name is Thomas Shipley and I share ideas at my website, tomdriven.dev. I also very rarely and occasionally tweet at tomdrivendev, but if you're like me and you have questions way after the session, then that's possibly the best place to get in touch with me. And then finally, as mentioned, I work for Global Logic in the UK. I'm a head of test there. I look after the testers, make sure they've got the right skills and they're working for the right clients. So I'd like to start with 3 ideas. And I'll talk about these ideas throughout today's talk. The first is that people want help with their problems. We all appreciate help with our problems, and everyone else is the same. We often share the same problems. So it's very rare that the problem you're experiencing is unique to you. Most people experience the same problems, and we can take advantage of that. And finally, you don't always need permission to solve problems. Sometimes you can just go ahead and solve the problem. And so we can use all 3 of these ideas to be more persuasive. So I'm going to talk about that throughout today and the session. So I'd like to start with a story. It's my story of failed persuasion in the past. And I have some characters for this story. So we have Bob, who looks suspiciously like me, but you can't tell because he has glasses, and he's the QA. We have Sue, the developer, Ivy, the business analyst, and finally, we have Zoe, the project manager. And we're going to be talking about these characters throughout today's session. And so, Bob starts by going to Sue, asking for help with some performance tests that he's struggling with. It's a code problem, and Sue's a developer. She knows how to code really well, so hopefully she can help him get past it. So he asks for help, and Sue says, sorry, not right now, I'm busy. And so he kind of goes, oh, okay, I guess I'll speak to you later. Who else here has experienced that situation? Show me your hands. Right, now look around at all of you. See those hands? A lot of you have experienced this, myself too. And so, what can we learn from this story? So I'd like to start with a question. And it's rhetorical because I'm the one with the microphone and you all sat all the way over there. But what motivated you to attend today's talk? And I think it's because you want help with your problem. Maybe many different problems. Maybe a manager doesn't support you. Maybe the team doesn't listen to your ideas. Maybe perhaps you're hungover and you were looking for a dark room to sit in which case this is the best room in the building, but you want help with one of your problems. And I know that, and unfortunately, I used it to trick you to attend today. So let's take a quick look at the abstract for this talk that some of you may have already seen. So this is the abstract for today's talk, and I've gone through and done some bolding and some changing of colors. And you can see all those words. In fact, let's start with the word in the sort of pinkish color. That's conference. I just replace that with the conference that I am submitting to. So straight away you can see the conference that you are attending. So it's all about you. I then use all the you words to talk about you and your problem. I don't talk about my problem, my experience. I talk about you and what you want to achieve. I talk about how I want to help you develop your style, show the potential of your idea. So the foundation of persuasion then is that it's easier to get to help someone than persuade them to help you. It's far easier just to go offer help to somebody than get them to help you with your problem. And Sue probably needs help as well. So the trick to persuasion then is that you should frame your problem so it's the other person's problem too. So you don't talk about your problem, you talk about their problem, and it just so happens that that helps you as well. And again, I use this trick in the abstract. So in the beginning, I talk about your problem that I want to help you with. And at the end, I flip it on its head, all those words in green, and I say that's our problem, it's our shared problem. We're in it together and we should help each other. We are not let down by our idea. Let us change that. How we as a community combine that with your great idea, you will be unstoppable. It's quite a persuasive trick that you can use with people. So how can we bring this together then into a structured approach that you can use with your teams? And so these are my 3 Ps of persuasion. When thinking about persuading others, you should think about your personality, your style, how you approach persuading people, the people themselves, the people you're targeting with persuasion, and your plan, your structured approach as to how you're going to approach that person to make your argument, to persuade them of your point of view. So let's start with personality. What are the behaviors and characteristics that will make us all more persuasive when talking to others? Now, I believe that this is made up of a balanced personality. Get some water. So a balanced personality is important because it allows us to be seen as fair, which is really important when talking to others. And it's made up of how we act and how we're seen, how we're perceived by others. And so when Bob is looking to persuade Sue, what are some of the behaviors, characteristics he should embody? So firstly, he should be positive. Because for 2 reasons. Firstly, he should be positive because he should have some belief in himself that he's capable of persuading this person. If he goes into it from the very beginning with a really self-defeating attitude, people pick up on that, and that makes you less persuasive. The second reason to be positive is just human nature. We all like to be around positive people. And so if you can be positive while looking to persuade someone, even if it's a challenging conversation, then they're more likely to listen to you. The second is asking questions and actively listening to the response. Again, there's 2 reasons for this. There's a sneaky reason and there's a human behavior reason. So the sneaky reason is if you ask questions, if Bob asks questions of Sue and he actively listens to the response, then he's going to get information. He's going to have information, he might understand what frustrations Sue has, the problems she's facing and so on, and he can use that to be more persuasive. The second reason, the human nature part, is that we all like to be listened to. If you sit down with someone and ask them questions and you're genuinely interested in the response, you ask follow-up questions, you don't just wait to say your thing next, then that makes the person like you. We all like to be listened to, they're more likely to want to help you. And then finally, Bob should be persistent. It's unlikely that you're going to persuade someone on the first try, so you should have more than one attempt and not be too put off. And then finally, how are we seen? So ideally, Sue should see Bob as a team player. So hopefully, Sue doesn't think that Bob is just interested in himself because she's going to be less likely to help. The second reason is trustworthiness. So often when we solve problems, we help each other and we do it together. It's a team effort. And if Bob is kind of known for not really doing his part and trying to avoid work and not very trustworthy, then Sue's going to ask herself, well, why should I even help him in the first place? He's going to leave me with all the work. I don't want to do that. So you need to be trustworthy. And then finally, credibility. We want to be credible when we present our ideas. But of course, credibility is this really big topic and can be a lot of different things. So how can you be credible? There's lots of different ways to be credible, and this is probably a talk in and of itself, but I'm just going to give you this one, which is talking about power as credibility, and it comes from some research from French and Raven and their basis of power. So you've got 6 ways there that you can be credible while looking to persuade others. You can be coercive, which is not where I would recommend you start, but you can force people. You can threaten punishment. If any of you have ever had a run-in with HR, then you know about coercion. So you can force people to get them to do what you want, but you'll only get them to do a base level of compliance. The second is reward. The flip side of coercion, you can thank people. Thank you is a reward. It's cheap, it's easy, you say thank you, genuinely mean it, people like that. And that reward will make you more persuasive. It's a source of power. But again, it will only get you so far. So we move on to the others. There's legitimate power. If you are a test lead, a head of department, you're an engineering manager, you're in a position of authority, then people may well look up to you, you may inspire them, you may lead them, you may be able to just tell them you've got legitimate power and you can use that to persuade other people. Then there's expert power, your skill. Expert power is a really great one because we can all be experts. Whether you're a junior member of the team or a senior member of the team, you may know the product really well. You may know the test framework really well. You can be an expert. You don't have to be a seasoned pro of 20 years experience. And expertise moves with you between companies and locations, so you can rely on that. You can be trusted. Then there's referent power. Referent power is proper sort of playground school stuff. If people like you, they're more likely to want to help you. So if you're popular on the team, then well done you get a free pass. And then finally, informational power. If you have access to information that other people don't have, you might be able to use that to persuade them. So they're the 6 bases of power that you can use for credibility. Coercion, reward, legitimate, expert, referent, and informational. So now let's talk a little bit about people. The second P of the 3 Ps of persuasion. So many people do this, and I did this a lot when I was trying to persuade people at the start of my career. When you want to persuade someone of something, they focus on their problem, your problem. So in Bob's case, he went over to Sue and he talked about improving the performance test code. Sue doesn't care about that problem, that's Bob's problem. He's interested in that. Sue, however, it turns out, has a related problem. There's a performance bug in the API, it turns out, because I've made up this example, and it's my example, I can do what I want. So there's a performance bug in the API. So there's these 2 related problems. So when Bob is looking to talk to Sue and to persuade Sue, he should focus on the middle, the overlap. Focus on where these problems overlap, which is gathering performance data. In order for Sue to solve her problem, she needs performance data. In order for Bob to give that performance data, he needs the performance test to work. So they've got a shared problem. That's where Bob should focus his efforts. And then, once he understands where he should focus his efforts, we can also think about who on the team might be able to help influence Sue. So you can use this little graph here to help you figure it out. But on the one side, you can see in this matrix, we've got individual influence. And then on the other side, we've got individual interest. How influential is the person over, in this case, Sue? And how much interest do they have in solving the problem? So we start off with problematic people. These people have a lot of influence, so a lot of influence over Sue, but they're not particularly interested in the problem. So they might just say something off the cuff, not really understanding, because they're not that bothered, but it'll have a lot of impact because Sue will listen to them. So you should keep those people updated, resolve any concerns they have a proactive approach. Then we have Ivy. Ivy, the business analyst, sits down at the bottom where she doesn't have that much influence over Sue, it turns out, and not a lot of interest either in solving this problem. So Ivy is indifferent. So we should monitor Ivy. So by monitor, I mean just keep them updated, share little updates of how the problem's being solved, just so they feel involved, but really, you don't have to do too much effort there. So if we move over in interest, we can move to our supporters. So our supporters, we should keep them informed. And the reason for that is they don't have a lot of influence, so that Sue won't listen to them very much, but they're really interested in the problem, so they'll give us support in solving it. So keep them updated, regular feedback, get their opinions, and get them involved in solving that problem. And then finally, we have Zoe at the top. Zoe's a promoter, so Zoe's going to be very useful in this, because Zoe has a lot of influence over Sue, and also, it turns out, a lot of interest in solving the problem. And so we should engage with our promoters. We should get them involved in solving the problem, work with them really closely, and leverage their influence over the person we're looking to persuade. So, as we move on from understanding the team dynamics and the individual, we now might want to focus on why Sue might resist persuasion in the first place. Because, of course, no matter what your argument is, there may be just core reasons that she's never going to listen to Bob. So the first reason might be fear. Maybe she's scared of the idea, she's nervous about it, she doesn't understand it. So Bob should be looking to understand what causes that fear and how he might be able to solve it. Maybe he can do a proof of concept, perhaps, to show her that it's not that scary. The second is a loss of control. So some of you, if you've been working in teams and you've tried to introduce maybe a new test framework and you've met a bit of resistance, sometimes the reason for that can be the team feels they're losing a sense of control. They understand the current framework. They don't want this new one because they don't understand how it works, and they already own this one. They own this, their little piece. So the top tip here, when looking to persuade other people, don't dictate to them. Don't say, we must do it this way. It's an old consulting trick. Give them options. Say, we've got this problem. We could solve it this way, that way, maybe this way. What do you think? That way you're getting them involved in the process. They're more likely to be receptive. The third reason is comfort, good enough. Maybe the current performance testing solution is just good enough and it's not a problem. And so again, a proof of concept can be really helpful here. There's a psychological barrier to taking that first step. We all put things off. I'm terrible for it, putting it off because you've not made a start. But once you make a start, it's easy because you've kind of got the ball rolling. Similar idea here. So maybe do a proof of concept and that'll help. And then the final one, which I've certainly come across in the past, and maybe some of you have as well, is it's a personal issue. The individual you're looking to persuade just doesn't like you. So maybe Sue doesn't like Bob. Maybe Bob said something mean at a Christmas party. And so because of that, in the short term, probably the best thing for Bob to do is just to get someone else to do the persuasion for him. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So maybe lean on Zoe. Get Zoe to do that persuasion. And in the long term, maybe reflect on why Sue doesn't like him. And not everyone's going to like everyone, so that's fine. But if there was something, like he said, something a bit mean, maybe he should apologize and the team can move on. So they're the 4 reasons that Sue might resist persuasion. So finally, we can bring this all together into a little bit of a plan. So how can we bring this together? So as you may remember from the previous slides, before Bob just went up and talked about his problem, said he had a problem with performance tests. Can you help? Sue said no, he walked away. It was all very sad. This time round, he's going to use the different things that we've talked about, so the sources of credibility. Turns out in Bob's case, he has 2 sources of power that he can use for credibility. He's an expert in performance testing. He knows all about performance testing, and informational. Because it turns out the reason that Zoe is so interested is that she's getting chased about the performance bug that's being worked on by Sue. She's having to go to regular meetings, management in the business asking why it's not being solved because it's causing them a lot of issues, costing them a lot of money. So he's got that information from Zoe, he can use that. And then it's a shared problem. As we spoke about, he's not going to talk about the code issue in the performance tests because he knows that Sue needs performance data. He's going to talk about that, at least initially. And then finally, we've got our promoters and supporters identified. Zoe is that promoter, that supporter person who we can lean on to influence a little bit. And so a conversation changes a little, as you can see here, where Bob initially goes up to Sue and says about how he might be able to help her gather performance test data. Sue, of course, is very receptive to that. We all want help. He then moves on to say, great, and he does the old bait and switch and says, well, that's great, but I've got this issue with the code. I wonder if you would take a look. And then he also puts a little bit of flattery in there because he says, obviously, you're so brilliant at coding, and I do a little bit, but I'm not great. Could you help me? Again, a little bit of flattery goes a long way. And then he just subtly threads in the bit of information he's got, that other source of power, and mentions that Zoe is under a lot of pressure from management within the organization to fix this performance issue and to give report on progress. So could you help me? I'm sure you'll spot the issue quickly. You're really, really smart. And Sue is persuaded by this and says, fine, it's a tricky bug, I'll help you figure it out. Now, okay, this is a made-up example and I've been able to change things around, but this is a far more persuasive way of talking to someone than just going, I have a problem, help me. People are less interested in that. So sometimes persuasion just won't work. So what do you do then? So the secret of persuasion is just not to bother. Don't persuade anybody, just do what you think is right. That would be my advice. Don't bother persuading anyone, just get on with it. Or, as more eloquently put by the late Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, if it's a good idea, go ahead and do it. It is much easier to apologize than it is to get permission. So if you really believe in the idea and you think you're capable of getting on with it, just get on with it. And here is my 4-step plan. Now, I have a really supportive manager, unfortunately, and he quite possibly will watch this recording back. So I'm going to ask you to do something for me before I give away all these secrets. So on the count of 3, I want you to say, hello, Mark, right? Ready? I know you're all tired and hungover, but try and be loud. We'll hopefully break his headphones, right? 1, 2, 3.
Hello, Mark.
I mean, that was kind of like a little bit. Try again. 1, 2, 3.
Hello, Mark.
That'll do. Thank you very much. Right, so the 4 steps to getting things done without permission. There are 4 of them. Step 1, talk to people about your idea. So you have an idea, you want to do it, get feedback by talking to people in the team and other teams and within your organization. As you talk to people, you may build a little bit of consensus. So if you do, brilliant, start working with those people to create a proof of concept. Really tightly scoped, a small proof of what that idea is going to do. It could be technical, it might be non-technical, but just trial it out. Step 3, showcase that work to everybody. You've now got something that removes that psychological barrier. You've tried it. So get it in front of people. If you have lunch and learn sessions, brown bags, if you have an internal conference, if you've got meetups, even if it's just like a team meeting at the end of the week, wherever you can, get your idea in front of people. And then finally, step 4. Step 4 is kind of sneaky, and I use it on Mark all the time, but when you get to the end of this, you've got proof. Because you've talked to people about your idea, you've got feedback, you've created a proof of concept, so you've proven it can be done, at least initially. You've showcased it to everybody and got even more support, so you've got social evidence that this is solving a problem that people care about. It's far harder for someone like Mark and other management type people to turn around and say, no, you shouldn't do that, when they've got all that proof in front of them. So go then and get the sign off that you need. And here's the thing, I'm not going to lie to you, you might fail in doing all of this. But that's absolutely fine, because it's not really failing anyway. As we look to persuade people, we develop so many skills in critical analysis, technical skills from those proof of concepts, in quality and testing, presentation skills. If you're going around and seeking maybe forgiveness because you're going to try and do something without permission, you're going to have to present that work to people. So you're going to build those skills. Managing expectations and stakeholder management, thinking about who your promoters and your supporters are. That's going to help you manage the personalities within your organization. Good skill to build. And then finally, organizational process. You're going to learn about the hurdles of sign-off and different things that you need to achieve. And of course, if all else fails, seek forgiveness. Just go, yeah, I tried it, it didn't work, silly me. Don't worry about it. So, to wrap up, these are my 3 ideas on persuading others. Firstly, that people want help with their problems. Don't talk about your problem, talk about their problem, and showcase to them how you might be able to help. Secondly, we often share the same problems. It is very rare that you will have a problem 100% unique to you in your team or organization. So find the people that share that problem and frame your persuasive argument in a way that it's their problem as well. So think about Bob and Sue and how Bob started talking not about the performance test code bug, he talked about needing to gather performance data. Far more persuasive. And then finally, the 3rd idea, solve problems without permission. You don't need permission. If you're still not very convinced by this is being recorded. I officially give you all permission to do whatever you want within your organizations and solve problems. Either way, even if you don't solve the problem, even if it struggles, it doesn't work out, you will learn a lot by going through that process. So give it a go. Because ultimately, you are all here at this conference learning from each other. You've been going to great sessions, workshops, you've been networking with your peers. You're going to go back to your organizations full of ideas of how you might improve quality. Please use these techniques to amplify your voice in teams. I've had so many conversations over the couple of days talking to testers going, oh, no one really listens to me. No one really listens to my idea. Take these techniques and trick them. Trick them to listen to your idea. They will listen to you. You just have to change the argument ever so slightly. And so use them to amplify your ideas within your team. And so with that, bang on 25 minutes, which I'm very pleased with. If you have any questions, I would be happy to hear them. But otherwise, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. I really appreciate it. Okay.
So thank you, Thomas. We'll be having some questions over there. Delivery is on the way.
Hey.
Thanks. Does this work? Hello, hello. Ah, okay. Now I persuaded it. Thanks, Thomas, for this talk. The example you showed with the dev and the QA, to me that seems to be one of the that rings the bell of the age-old QA versus dev situation. So to me, my initial thought was, okay, they need to work on a different problem, which is collaboration and agile way of working together before trying to persuade each other. But that's a different topic.
Yes.
My question to you is, you described persuasion in a situation when you're talking to peers. So how would your approach change when trying to persuade your manager or even higher hierarchy levels like C levels?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Can someone switch off the recording? Because I recently moved into a management position about a year ago, so I don't do so much hands-on testing anymore. And it took me quite a bit of effort to shift the focus. So as testers, as technical people, you're maybe used to making arguments around the technical thing, or you might talk about business impact, but it's kind of from a user focus. Once you start getting involved with business people at like that C-suite level, that matters a bit, but so does like revenue and profit and sort of the survivability of the organization. So all the same concepts still apply, I think, those 3 Ps of persuasion. I think it still applies. All that happens is you perhaps shift some of the arguments you use. So instead of maybe having a pure user focus or pure technical focus, you might move into blending in a little bit of a business focus. So for example, if I'm talking to my manager or someone more senior than me and I'm wanting to justify a training budget for an individual, I might talk about things like return on investment, that sort of thing. What's the value that they're going to get in pounds and pence? And it's something we do with clients as well, is kind of talk to them about, for this testing activity you're going to do, this is roughly the sort of savings you might make if you're more efficient. So it's still very similar. The only thing I would say is it can be quite intimidating doing that. But much like public speaking, practice makes perfect. Just go out there and have a go.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
We have another one. Stand up and state your name.
Hey. They're just trying to trick you.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, now. I'm Ernest. Great talk.
Thank you.
Right? From my understanding, when you were explaining the persuasion, it was very close to art of negotiations to create credibility and persuade in the negotiation part. So you traded times of the person to take the result that you are both happy with.
So I'm not sure I understand the question. You talked about sort of negotiation.
From my perspective, the persuasion, this part, yes, is a big part of negotiation, so we can use it on that part.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think another good reason to be good at persuasion, just outside of your working life, is we do it all the time. Persuasion is just part of negotiation. And so if you are maybe talking about buying a product in a store, or you go on holiday and you're haggling with somebody. That's all persuasion. That's all. It kind of forms into negotiation. I think sometimes one of the things that people get wrong about persuasion, in my view, is they come at it as my way is the only way. So I sort of talked about that a little bit in a previous slide where I said about what are the reasons that Sue might resist. So providing choice is really important, and that's a cornerstone of good negotiation. You don't go in there saying, I must have it this way, because whoever you're negotiating with may not share that view and tell you to get lost. Whereas if you go, okay, I'm acceptable in this range, then they're more likely to listen and you can have a conversation. So, yeah.
Hey, I'm here.
Hello.
Hi.
Stand up.
So I guess I'm going to go back to a little bit what Ron was saying. But so you mentioned you're a manager right now.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a tech lead or something like that. I see persuasion as something that is just a fact of life. You know,
Yes.
you have to use persuasion. Though I've clearly identified situations in the last year, for instance, where I had to persuade someone, a developer or whatever, a team lead, whatever. And usually I don't feel happy about it. In the sense of, as leaders, it's like I would prefer to be in a, let's say, in a setting, in a context where persuasion isn't necessary. Okay? Is this something that you also experience? Is this something that you've thought about as a manager as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think persuasion and other related skills are kind of the soft skills. So my background is very much in the technical as a tester, but a tester really focused on the debt side. And so moving into this sort of stuff, the people stuff, the sort of soft skills can be quite challenging. I think the way I looked at it, and possibly the way that you've learned about it as well in your experience, is that it's an important part about becoming a rounded leader. Technical people or testers, whether that's technical testing or not, they like being led by people like them. That's great. But the problem comes that sometimes those leaders that get into those roles got into those roles because they're really good at the job, testing or technical work, whatever it is, and you forget that part of the job is also the soft skills. To be a really great leader, you need to be able to persuade people, you need to be able to think about how people handle their emotions, how they handle their workplace, how everyone isn't the same, and that sort of thing. So yes, it's uncomfortable, but again, like public speaking, it's something that you just sort of learn by doing, and it's an important growth point.
I suppose we can take the last question now.
Hello.
Hi.
Here.
Hello.
I'm Eden. Great talk.
Thank you.
The way I was saying it's kind of blurred in a way that persuasion and manipulation are different. So how do you see that?
It's a really good question. So actually, if I go back really quickly to the slide where I talk about how I used the fact that you want a problem solving against you, I was really, really tempted when putting this slide together to say, I know that instead of I used it to persuade you, I used it to manipulate you. Because effectively, persuasion is in part manipulation. You're persuading someone to go against their original idea. It's quite a cynical view, though. I kind of more see it as you are persuading someone to see things from a different perspective. We all are kind of blinkered this way. We all see things in a certain way. And the more successful people, in my experience, are able to sort of expand that view. And persuasion is helping people expand that view. Where's the red light? I'm going to leave that for you to decide. But personally, you're right. Persuasion is used in ways that are not always for the good of the person being persuaded. Certain political candidates come to mind, but I'm not going to say it because I'm on camera. Speak to me afterwards.
Well, thank you, Thomas. It's
Cheers,
always nice.
you. Thank you.
I kind of always find it funny because when technical people are having a conference, it's always like, how can we explain things to business people? And when business people are having a conference, it's like, how can we actually understand what technical people are even talking about? So thanks for bridging this gap.
Cheers, thank you. Thank you very much. Cheers.